touched on New Year's Day. I discovered evidence suggesting my wife may be involved in an emotional or physical affair. It's been a difficult few weeks, impacting my daily life. I haven't confronted her yet and need more evidence to protect my interests in our shared assets due to the lack of a prenuptial agreement. Here's some background. I'm in my mid-40s, she's in her late 30s, and we got married in 2021. And before meeting her, I focused on my successful personal business. However, our relationship started strong, but changed after our honeymoon. Her behavior in the bedroom shifted, and she used soul intimacy as a form of punishment, which was a significant aspect of our relationship. Around late March to early April, a few months into our marriage, I discussed our reduced soul activity and the unhealthy use of intimacy as a punishment with my wife. Unfortunately, this led to major arguments and a 2-month period without sex. Although we patched things up to some extent, the frequency of our intimacy continued to decline steadily, from twice a week in May-June to once a week in the summer, and only a few times since October. The person involved in this situation with my wife is her boss, whom I found exchanging messages with her in a shared Word document. Her conversations contain highly soul language, although they don't explicitly discuss physical encounters. This seems to have been going on since shortly after our marriage. I'm torn between gathering more proof or confronting my wife while feeling a mix of emotions like sadness, loneliness, self-disgust, humiliation, shock, and anger. If there hasn't been a physical affair, I'd be more inclined to work things out, but I am overwhelmed with sadness and uncertainty. Writing this has taken me several days. Hello everyone. I appreciate your responses. They've been genuinely helpful. This morning, I talked to a lawyer friend who, while not a family lawyer, mentions that Canada follows a no-fault approach when it comes to infidelity. Your maple syrup analogy for asset division was both amusing and on point, giving me some relief. I had an appointment with a family lawyer next Thursday to fully understand my rights and risks. To address other questions, CRC, you bring up a valid point about potential fraud, which has crossed my mind as well. It makes me wonder how premeditated all of this might be, which is painful. Buster, your insight about workplace affairs and secret encounters hit me hard. They both work at a hotel, with him in a high position and her not. That's until now. I've been grappling with the emotional affair aspect, but now I'm concerned about how easily it could escalate to a physical affair given their work environment. I don't have a detailed understanding of hotel work, but the thought that they could easily find places for such activities is heart-wrenching. Her backstory includes being cheated on by her ex-husband, just the tip of the iceberg in a toxic relationship. Ironically, they get along better now than during their marriage, which is at least better for their boys. I don't have reason to believe this is a pattern for her, or anything like it has happened before. But, as others have pointed out, for her to engage in an affair so early suggests that I meant nothing to her. I can't easily accept that as true though, and I'm struggling to understand how things have deteriorated so rapidly. As for the other man, her boss, he's recently remarried, in his mid-50s, and his new wife is in her late 30s. They had a child around the same time my wife and I got married. I've met his wife a few times at social events, hosted at their place. She's not just a trophy wife, she's beautiful, has a great job, and seems level-headed. Despite their age gap, they appear to be a seemingly perfect couple. The worst part about waiting to confront this situation is the present feels like a charade. We're going on a ski vacation with friends this weekend, and the idea of playing the role of a loving husband while knowing our relationship is about to face a major crisis makes me physically ill. I've lost a significant amount of weight, and even my wife noticed it recently, though she expressed concern. I keep swinging between extreme emotions. This situation is incredibly tough. Hello everyone. It was a dreadful weekend, and I must find a solution quickly because I'm not skilled at pretending and reality is breaking through the facade. Two significant events from the weekend stand out. On Saturday, my wife was engrossed in her phone throughout dinner, and I couldn't see who she was talking to. Her excessive phone use prompted some friends to jokingly comment on her attachment to it. Later during drinks after dinner, I did something unusual. I pretended to be engrossed in my phone to see how she'd react. I cannot stalked abuse. This upset her, and she left the gathering in frustration. However, that night, she attempted to initiate intimacy with me, but I resisted. She went to bed upset. By the way, if she were having a physical affair, would she genuinely want to be intimate with me at the same time? The following day, she barely spoke to me, which was okay with me. It wasn't until we drove home together that we talked. What happened shocked me. She asked me if I had been unfaithful. I was left speechless. I asked her what led to this unbelievable question, and she explained, "You've been distant lately, less interested in sex, always on your phone. Is there someone else?" I struggled to control my emotions. After a moment of silence during which her demeanor shifted from defiance to uncertainty to discomfort, I replied, "No, I haven't been unfaithful, and I never would be. If I had issues with our relationship, I'd address them openly, not through cheating. People who cheat are deceitful and manipulative." She then backtracked, saying, "I didn't really think you were. I just needed to gauge where you are right now. I honestly don't recognize this woman anymore. Just a quick update. I met with my lawyer, and it's genuinely the best I felt about any aspect of this situation since it started. I'm 99% certain my wife doesn't know about this site, but on the off chance she does, I'll keep the details of my meeting to a minimum. I'm confident I can come out of this with minimal financial damage. These past few days have been incredibly strange. My wife has been treating me exceptionally well, almost like our first months together. She's tried to initiate intimacy twice, but I managed to handle it positively without raising any questions from her. Yesterday, while she was out, I accessed her computer again and noticed that her Word document had been updated with more exchanges between her and the other person. To address some of your questions about the document, it doesn't contain evidence of past sexual exchanges or future meetings. But in many ways, it's worse. Worse. They have multiple nicknames for each other, inside jokes, essentially a secret universe that suggests they're deeply infatuated with each other. I'm devastated, but well, it seems I have some serious issues with my judgment, so I don't need a private detective or more proof. The boys are going to their dad's tomorrow, leaving us a whole week, especially Saturday, to address this. I'll confront her on Saturday without making threats. I'll simply tell her she's free to date this man and do as she pleases with him, but I won't share my wife, etc. Wish me luck. I'll do my best to explain the last 24 hours. Yesterday, my wife dropped our boys off at her ex-husband's place after school. Instead of coming home, she called me to say her ex had asked her to stay for the weekend to help with the boys, because he had broken his leg earlier in the week and is quite incapacitated. His wife was away on a business trip until Sunday night. I wasn't bothered by this at all. I understand their relationship and what it is. The issue was more like a nagging feeling, like little spider senses in me as the hours passed, whispering at me, then practically yelling that she might be lying somehow. Early conditions, around 6:30 p.m. I playfully texted her, "Send me a photo of you and the boys." She left my message unread until about 8:30 p.m., didn't respond, and only after an hour had passed since reading it, she sent me a random close-up photo of herself that could have been taken anytime, anywhere. At that point, a nauseous feeling overwhelmed me. Around 11 p.m. I couldn't handle it anymore. I drove to her ex-place. Her car wasn't there. Then, I went to her boss's house, about 8 minutes away from her ex's. Her car wasn't there either. His car wasn't visible, but he had a garage, so it could have been inside. I felt a mix of relief and concern. So where was she? Then it hit me. I drove to their hotel. What I saw left me in shock. Her car was in the parking lot, not far from his. I'm ashamed to admit that I sat there and cried for it. I don't know how long. I'm not usually a crier, so it was a strange feeling. My mind raced with countless thoughts, yet it felt like I wasn't thinking at all. Despite all the preparation from the shared document and this form, nothing could prepare me for that kind of discovery. I took some photos and even a video. Whatever. I went home and tried to collect myself as best I could. Sleep was impossible. Around 6 a.m., I knew what I had to do. I checked the hotel again to see if their cars were still there. They were. I took more photos and drove to his house. My primary intent was probably to share what I knew with his wife, about 95% of me, and the remaining 5% considered confronting him in front of his wife if he returned to his place. A part of me was open to confronting him. I've never resorted to physical violence in my life, but he seemed like an appropriate place to start. I sat on the edge of his driveway for over an hour, and suddenly, I saw curtains being drawn and lights turning on in his house. Looking up their driveway to the front door felt like one of the bravest things I'd ever done. I knocked, and his wife looked understandably surprised when she answered. However, when she realized it was me, she was warm and asked if everything was okay. everything was okay and why I was there. I told her I needed to talk with her. What gave me further courage was that her reaction to my need to talk made it clear that she already had an inkling of what I was about to share. I won't delve into the details of the whole conversation out of respect for the emotions both she and I were going through in such a short time. But in essence, I saw her go through the initial stages of grief in about 10 minutes. Shock, pain, anger, and sadness. I showed her screenshots of their shared Word document, and she believed its authenticity right away because of his writing style and certain affectionate expressions he also used with her. It was tougher to show her the photos of the cars at the hotel, but I had to start with that. She told me he'd informed her on Friday morning that he had to leave for a nearby city for unexpected weekend meetings with top executives. He cleverly claimed he had to stop by the hotel on his way to the airport and leave his car there for the weekend. Why wouldn't he just pick up my wife from her ex's? It dawned on me that the entire story about her ex needing her help for the weekend was probably a total fabrication. She likely dropped her boys off and headed straight to the hotel. That's probably exactly what happened. I feel foolish. How could this woman, who shared my life, lead a double life like that without me knowing? What's so special about this guy that makes him worthy of such a choice? Objectively, I'm arguably better than him in every superficial sense, and definitely better by objective standards. Now, she's going to spend the next few nights at her mother's. She's uncertain about how to proceed. She plans to confront him, but has asked whether I'd feel comfortable confronting my wife first. She intends to gauge her actions based on how that conversation goes. Yesterday, I was ready for the confrontation with my wife, but I've lost the heart for it. Now I'm torn between wanting to scream at her for hours or simply never seeing her cheating face again. She just texted me with some silly emoji, saying it's a lazy Saturday where she is. What a fake, deceitful, treacherous person, and what a reckless risk-taker. I guess she's counting on the fact that we don't really ask the boys for a debrief on their week at their dad's when we pick them up on Fridays. Still, it's so risky. Imagine being so infatuated with a man that you take such risks for him. Well, I'm prepared to confront her. It's not what my energy and emotions want. I wish to vanish to a remote cabin in the wilderness for a few months and never see my wife again. I'm impressed by all of you who consider reconciliation in the aftermath of such trauma, but I can't. This is a deal breaker for me, and there's honestly nothing my wife can say to change my mind. I wouldn't want to expose her and her lover. I also want to erase these two from my thoughts forever. I feel terribly ill about facing my wife. Yesterday morning, I had a clear plan for a conversation, but now I'm a wreck. Sorry for the length and rambling, jumping right in. Early Sunday evening, I heard keys in my front door, and to my shock, it was my wife. It was unexpected as I had already planned two things for the next day. An early visit to my lawyer and a trip up north to a wilderness resort I had always wanted to stay at. I didn't have a set plan for how I would confront her, and I wasn't expecting or wanting it to happen in person. The scene was chaotic. She was on the offensive right from the start, talking a mile a minute to my stunned brain. Here's what seemed to. It's late Sunday afternoon. Obi drove to the hotel, asked the front desk to call her husband and tell him his wife was in the lobby waiting to see him. He apparently stuck to his story for a few minutes, then eventually convinced his wife to have their confrontation back at their home. What amazed and disgusted me the most was that my wife waited at the hotel until after Posum and Obi had their confrontation, clearly so that she could gauge what Obi and I knew, and get our story as straight as possible. I'm certain she waited because Obi texted me about 30 minutes before my wife came home saying, "Sorry, just couldn't wait, had to have it out with them." I asked her how it went, and she said he claimed it was all fantasy and that they hadn't even kissed yet. When she questioned him about the overnight stays at the hotel, he said that due to last-minute changes in his special weekend meetings going online, he thought it would be more convenient to stay there. He mentioned that the thrill of their relationship was pushing flirtation to the limit without physical contact. When his wife expressed disbelief and pressed him further, he admitted that the closest they had come to anything inappropriate that weekend was engaging in several self-pleasing sessions in each other's presence, but insisted they hadn't touched. So to avoid repeating, this was the exact story I heard from my wife on Sunday night, which eerily mirrored everything I had just heard from Obi. It would have been somewhat more credible if my wife had diverged on certain details, but no, the stories were identical. Honestly, the best way to describe how I processed things on Sunday night was that it felt like an out-of-body experience. I felt absolutely no emotion, none at all, as I watched this complete stranger play her role as a shocked-to-be-accused but definitely loyal spouse. After she had delivered her lengthy, clearly rehearsed speech, I quietly rose from the table and left the room. This infuriated her, and she followed me into the bedroom. She put on yet another mask, this time becoming the righteously angry spouse. She claimed that my indifference to her honesty just now was a reflection of my larger indifference throughout our marriage, and that her fantasy roleplay, or whatever it was a natural response to enduring my indifference. At that moment, I couldn't help but start laughing. It wasn't a cool, collected laugh. It was somewhat unhinged. It seemed to unsettle her a bit, which gave me an opening to respond. I proceeded to list off every detail, dating almost back to the day we met, that demonstrated the exact opposite of indifference. In fact, I argued that if I were guilty of anything, it was caring for her too much. She began to cry, plead, and reach out to me, which was far from attractive. She tried to hug and touch me, but I gently pushed her away. In a calm but wary voice, I told her, "You are no longer my wife. Frankly, even if your version of events were entirely true, you are deeply involved in an emotional affair, which is just as unacceptable to me as a physical one. However, I don't believe a word you're saying. You've lost all credibility. Our differences are irreconcilable, but tomorrow, I'm leaving to get away for a while. Before I go, my lawyer will start the necessary paperwork for divorce proceedings. Please spend the night elsewhere tonight. I plan to return here on Friday or Saturday, and I expect you to have moved all your belongings out of my house by then. Then your level of cooperation and respect for my wishes will affect how fair or not I'll be in the aftermath of all this." She cried and begged me to understand it was all a misunderstanding and that she'd do anything to return to the way things were. I told her that was impossible, knowing that if I stayed physically present, she would drag things out. I informed her that I was going for a drive and expected her to be gone when I returned. Fortunately, she was no longer there when I got back. Oh, and I recorded the entire episode. Thanks to Sai for that advice. Anyway, here I am in the wilderness feeling very sad and alone. I think I have found more peace in my soul, because I'm no longer enduring the agony of deprivation and deception, but I'm conflicted. I did, and still do love this woman. Perhaps she deserves a second chance. Maybe that's something she needed to get out of her system. However, then I think about the many financial steps I've already taken to detach myself from her. When she discovered some of the things I've done to sever our financial ties yesterday, she sent me a series of angry and incredulous texts. But this morning, I've been receiving texts and voicemails from her that make her seem like the most loving, faithful, adoring wife a man could imagine. As I navigate all of this, I'll need to remember the angry texts and not just focus on the others. She has also expressed a desire to drive up to where I am and spend days making love, which leads me to believe there might not be divided loyalties on her part. I'll be honest, even though it feels right, healthy, and liberating to pursue separation, there's a significant part of me that wants to explore the possibility of a future with her. This is truly a roller coaster of emotions for me. Thank you, everyone, for your helpful replies and support. This is a good place. Winced. I want to address a few recurring questions and clarify some things. I am still in shock grieving and quite depressed, so my posts here take on a more factual tone. Especially in my last two posts, where I had a lot to report, it was easier to state the facts without delving too deeply into my emotional responses. But to be clear, no part of me believes the masturbation story. Well, that's not entirely true. It seems like such an odd story and frankly more embarrassing than if they had just had regular intercourse. Part of me wants to believe it, coming from a hopeful but misguided place, thinking if they haven't had intercourse, maybe this is somehow salvageable. However, overall, it's an extremely laughable excuse, and I hope that someday, with more distance from all of this, I can actually find humor in it. Second, I should clarify that under no circumstances will my wife be visiting me here. I mentioned it because that's what she suggested. My actual response to her offer was to consider it a manipulative ploy on her part. I told her that turning the source of my pain, her deliberate withholding of sex from me and her choice to have sex with another man, into a solution was sick, and that she needed help. I should also mention that Obs and I have informed our spouses that we've seen the Word document in its entirety and have proof of their overnight stay at the hotel. I forgot to mention this earlier. My wife initially berated me for snooping in her computer. I calmly pointed out that there would have been no need for me to do so if she had proven herself to be a trustworthy partner. Finally, regarding my wife's previous marriage, I don't believe there was any infidelity involved. They had their issues, but her wandering wasn't one of them. Ultimately, where I stand right now is that I am done with her. Betrayal is one of those unforgivable sins for me, and everyone has different thresholds, especially when it comes to betrayal. If you were to ask any of the women I've dated in my lifetime, whether for a few months or several years, they would not cite poor communication as one of my flaws. I firmly believe that good communication is the foundation of healthy relationships, and above all, infidelity should never be used as a way to work through problems. You should be able to communicate and resolve issues together. What I've taken away from the hundreds and thousands of helpful words shared with me, here's this above all else: when it comes to dealing with the aftermath of infidelity, and when the betrayed person assessed the betrayer's suitability for any form of reconciliation, actions speak louder than words. My wife's actions, from the beginning until now, have shown complete disrespect and a total absence of remorse. I conveyed these very words to her just a few hours ago. At this moment, my plan is to serve her with divorce papers next week, request no contact from her for several months, and proceed with the assumption that this relationship is beyond repair. However, I can't predict how I would feel if, out of nowhere, she started displaying all the actions associated with genuine remorse for infidelity. Even if she did, it might still be too late. Shanice reconnected with me this morning via text. We're planning to have a phone catch-up tomorrow to compare notes and offer each other support. She's asked her husband to leave their house, and both her sister and mother are staying with her, which is great. I'm not sure about her plans for the future, but it seems like it might be harder for her to move on from him. Also, it's worth noting that his major relationships have all ended due to his history of cheating. The reasons why Abbas chose to be with him are complex and not suitable for discussion in this medium. I believe he, and possibly my wife as well, could face significant consequences at work, and in my opinion, it's the least they deserve.